Welcome to the WanderLearn Show. I'm your host, Tapon. In this episode, I have back Nejc Trušnovec from Slovenia, and we're going to discuss Ukraine. How are you, Nejc?
I'm fine, thank you. How are you?
I'm terrible, but that's not important. I want to know, how are Ukrainians doing? We talked 1 month after the Ukraine war set off, and you, just 2 weeks into the war, made this very, very bold prediction. You said that Russia was going to go down the tubes effectively, and that they weren't going to be able to penetrate from the north and go straight to Kyiv. You said that was kind of a no-win situation, and you also said that their only hope is to retreat and go to the east. And you said this when, at that time, the battle was going on several fronts. And you were actually quite right.
Yeah, the battle for Kyiv was at that time still raging. If you remember, this was the time when the Western media was still, putting out dramatic articles and news reports about how Kyiv will fall any hour now, any day now, how the final Russian assault needs to happen, and then the Kyiv will fall. And this was just total misjudgment on part of just popular media, which totally had no clue what was really going on there.
Right. And you also predicted that their only hope was to kind of regroup and go from the east. And that's exactly what they eventually did.
Yeah.
And so far, as of today, which is the 6th of July of 2022, it looks like that strategy has been actually working. Is that your assessment too?
So if you're saying the strategy about Russians redeploying to the east and then concentrating their forces there, overwhelming the Ukrainian defenses, yes, but not in the way you probably think, because Russia has basically managed to do just incremental gains, area gains. For as much material and personnel they have lost there, they have accomplished very, very little. So basically, what this means is Ukraine is winning and Russia is losing terribly. Why is Ukraine winning if it's losing ground? Because Ukraine is winning by getting losses, making losses on the Russian side. Russia is really, really limited with their personnel because they haven't. Putin hasn't acknowledged that this is a real war, so he's making this special operation, which means he cannot mobilize the whole of Russia. And so he started with around 200,000 soldiers. His nose got bleeded really, really bad around Kiev in the north. He had to retreat. And then he immediately repositioned troops in the east while they were still quite tired. They haven't had the time to really rest. So he pushed unreplenished troops back in the fight. And the whole plan was really not well organized. It was just, okay, we have to show something, we have to make a success, so let's push here, didn't work there, let's push there, didn't work there. So they were pushing on all different sides in the east, and maybe also choosing paths which were bound to fail. I mean, such tactical and strategic mistakes were made by the Russian side that it's almost unbelievable. But this is Russia. They if they don't succeed the first time, they will repeat it like I said the last time. They will throw men and soldiers there again. And by doing so, they had huge losses. So the last time we talked, I think they had around 16,000, 17,000 losses.
Right.
Now we are talking about 35,000 losses.
Right.
There are 3 clans in Russia. One clan is FSB clan, which belongs to the Putin clan. And now this guy is basically starting to make the shots. Just today, I think, or yesterday, he proclaimed that Lugansk is not going to be the end. Again, the goal is to conquer the whole of Ukraine, to denazify it, to demilitarize it. And this is totally unrealizable for Russia because they are totally beaten at the moment. They cannot. The small gains that they are making is by really bleeding a lot. So the little strategy that started to work kind of for them is really amass a lot of artillery in one place, bomb the hell out of where defenders are, and then try to send probing attacks. If the attack is repelled, if Ukrainians beat the attack, then start bombing again and again and again. And there is a huge disparity with the artillery count on Ukrainian side and on the Russian side. So Ukrainians weren't able to really answer with the same strength as the Russians did. There's also kind of a disparity between how they fight with artillery. Russia just, shoots in general area, while Ukraine is sniping Russian positions. Why? Because it has much smaller amount of guns and the ammo is much more limited than with the Russian side. So they adapted and started to really try to snipe their positions, their park vehicles, and so on. They started to really ramp up the destruction of Russian dumps, so the Russian ammo dumps, and this is really doing a very meticulous job because Russia needs ammo quite close to where the fight is going on, because they have really small amount of trucks available to put those ammo to the soldiers, to bring it to the soldiers on the front. So they need to have those dumps somewhere close to the railway stations. They put those ammunition down. It has to be quite close to where the front is, and then they have enough trucks to really disseminate this ammo with their army. But what is happening now? These ammo dumps are starting to blow up one after another. Why? Because Ukraine acquired long-range weapon systems from the West, which are doing a great job now with sniping these very important um, points, logistical points, ammo dump points, and are wreaking havoc with Russian army. So how long Russia can continue doing this? I mean, I was personally quite surprised that I was not surprised that the north, as I said, collapsed like I predicted. The north collapsed completely. I said that around Kharkiv, the Russians will maybe have a little bit more success, but I think I was wrong in predicting that sooner or later Kharkiv will fall also from Russians. They were almost pushed to the border, and then they regained some land there. So I was wrong with that. And I also said I think that I would be quite surprised if the Western Front would basically become a frozen conflict. It still is. It could still be, but by the way Russia is doing now, I would again be really surprised if the conflict would be frozen and the area would remain the way it is. So, like a static positional warfare, like it has been going on for a month now in Severodonetsk and Lysychansk. um, I would really be surprised because Russia really was scraping the bottom of the barrel for all the extra personnel they were trying to get. So they were already very low on personnel, on people who could fill in the gaps. They then made some quite nice tricks by trying to bring people from all over Russia to give them nice sums of money. So they managed to bring in lots of Russian minorities, like the Buryats and other minorities. And if you see um, the percentage of how many minorities were how many soldiers from those minorities were killed versus the Russian soldiers were killed, there's a huge disparity. So basically, Russian soldiers at the moment are a bit more in the background, manning the artillery, while the Russian minorities are put forward. And another trick is also the Lugansk and Donetsk People's Republics soldiers are basically used as cannon fodder. They are the ones who are testing, if the positions have been sufficiently destroyed with artillery bombardment or not. So they get just decimated. And the current estimate is that 55% of the whole those two republics military personnel has been either killed and or maimed. So imagine this: 55% of all the personnel from these two republics is basically uh, out of out of action.
Stalin, if I remember correctly, correct me if I'm wrong, that he basically purged most of his
Yeah.
generals because he was kind of afraid. And so it was right before World War II, I think, was when
Yeah.
he did his big purge. And so he didn't have any competent
Yeah.
generals
Yeah.
when the war started. So
Yeah.
World War II started off on a really
Yeah.
bad foot. But eventually, the great Russian
Yeah.
bear got its act together. Will the same thing happen this time? Because obviously Russia got
Yeah.
off on a bad foot. Can they turn their story around?
So it's a bit different from then because now the Russia started with the usual generals that they had in stock. There were no purges before they started the war, and then it was apparent that these generals are totally crappy. Really not doing their job really well. So the purge started as the war was going. Many of the high-ranking generals and the ones leading the war were purged, were changed, swapped with other guys. And it's one really funny event when there was this guy who was fighting in Afghanistan. He was retired, really keen on vodka. He basically drinks 1 liter of vodka a day. It is reported, and he was then put in charge of a special military special military of Russia. Huge guy, very fat one. They had to create a whole new uniform from him, and they were not able to put any stock um, um, body protection on him, so they had to combine two, the two to be able to protect him. It's so funny. So what this tells us is that Russia is really struggling with their generals, with their personnel. Not to say that amazing number of the colonels and lieutenants and generals were killed in Ukraine, which is unprecedented, really huge amount. So the ones who were uh, semi kind of capable of leading the army were killed off. The ones who were then brought in are not really good. Not to say that even the ones before were not really good. So it showed up. It showed that it's really a hard thing for Russia to overcome. I don't think they can overcome it. What happened in Second World War was Russia was not many people in the West know this, and even less in Russia. Russia was really hardly backed up, was very hard backed up by the West, by Western allies, by giving them lots of trucks, lots of locomotives, lots of ammo, lots of tanks, different weapon systems, and tooling systems, so they could build up industries in other parts of Russia which were not occupied, and then start ramping their production. Russia would be basically pushed over the Urals by Germany if not for this allied support. What is happening is that Russia has no support. It is totally isolated from the whole of world. Even China has turned away because I would say if Russia would be successful in their undergoing in Ukraine from the get-go, then China would probably, be more keen in helping them out with everything. But now even China is not willing to help them, and because for China it's more lucrative to remain business with the West and the whole globe actually than help with Russia, which is there's just a small percentage of trade for them. So even Russia, having basically the same type of autocratic system, you could say a fascist system like similar to Russia, is turning away from Russia, which is basically really making it much more harder for Putin.
Your predictions were pretty spot on.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things that
Mm-hmm.
was not spot on so far is that Putin would
Mm-hmm.
be taken, there would be a coup d'etat that he would be taken
Yes.
out. And so, do you still
Yeah,
believe
yeah.
that's going to happen?
Okay, yeah, good point. Oh yeah, definitely. And now the signs are even more stronger for that. What at the when we were talking the last time, the nationalists and the imperialists, these are the two other factions in Russia, the so-called clans, which are organized and they are not cooperating with each other. There is an internal tension between them, and of course the FSB clan, which is direct connection with Putin. There's also always been some meddling and tensions between them, but now it's really getting very heated. All the patriots, all the nationalists which didn't dare to speak against Putin are accusing him of basically screwing this war, that it was his fault. So they still don't recognize that, no, it was not just Putin's fault, it was the whole system. The army was so corrupt, it couldn't really, um, make it up for the deficiencies. But of course, Putin started it, and he should have been better informed that there's no way he can do this. Because if you remember, USA was informed before it happened, uh, quite a lot informed of what is going to happen. They knew what the Russian plan was, where the main Russian trust will, military trust will happen. So it was basically, Putin should have called it off by then, but he didn't. He went on regardless with it, with the war, and at that time, the moment he decided, he lost the war already, because there was no way he could win it. Um, the way the army was set up, the way, um, no, everything works in Russia. He would have to mobilize the whole of Russia. Then he would maybe have some chances of winning there. But since so many months have passed and still he hasn't mobilized it, although the war has went so bad for him, it means only one: he's really, really afraid to do so, because if he proclaims general mobilization, he will be immediately deposed. He cannot withstand the pressure. Even now, before doing the general mobilization, his chair is already very shaky.
In the Duma
Hmm.
or one of the parliament there, that they actually said
Hmm.
that they're going to try to mobilize part of the economy to produce more weapons.
Yeah, just recently, he proclaimed that. Uh, but the thing is that you have to mobilize for war before the war starts, because when you mobilize your economy, it takes a lot of time when you get on a war footing, really proper war footing. And not to say he's lacking all the proper, more high tech elements, gadgets that he's not getting anymore from the West. So for him, in order to be able to establish, like I said last time, to establish like a war economy where high tech material can be produced, takes years. And it would really be hard for him to pull off, because the whole of Russian society is basically not very modernized. It's not very inventive ever since Soviet Union fell apart. It's just not as inventive as it was before. And basically, what they were doing, it was just they were scavenging the military equipment that was available from the Soviet times, upgrading it to a degree, made a few advancements here and there, but because this high tech modern stuff is so expensive, and because the kleptocracy was so prevalent, they weren't able to even produce Armata 14 tanks, which they were sure they will produce in huge amounts. And their modern rockets basically are very, very low in stock. What Russia is very good in is with PR stunts. They would create like a supersonic rocket, and then they would, put make the Western media be in shock and awe of, like, wow, amazing what Russia did. We don't have any protection for that. We are screwed. And so this was basically playing on what Russia wanted to do. So they were acting more powerful all this time that they actually were. In this war, it was quite clear from the get-go that they're just paper tiger. Um, and they are not global force at all. They are even not even regional force anymore. And this is why I'm predicting the problem will start in Central Asia now, because the vacuum will happen, because when Russia will not be able to tend to those regions anymore. um, there Central Asia is like the Balkans. there are many different ethnicities there. You have a dictator which supports one ethnicity, and then the other ethnicity is usually pushed a bit aside. It's um, there are tensions which they can now spark up because those dictators cannot turn to Russia like they could before. Russia would then send special military forces there, take care of the dissidents, of the riots, and then things would be back to normal. But now Russia cannot do this
You're
anymore.
talking about the Central Asian countries like Turkmenistan and Uzbekistan and all those towns? Okay.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, what do you predict then, Nate, the way things are going to go? You give Putin how many more months in office or how many more years? Because here's the thing is I think that maybe his strategy is just to kind of hold the line and take Donetsk, at least hold the line there so the battlefront doesn't move. We're in a stalemate for months. And during that time, ramp up production and get his butt going again. Why can't that happen?
This would be really hard, really hard for Russia to pull off. First, now that they have conquered Severodonetsk, Lysychansk, they have now bumped into a huge fortress of the Ukrainian defenses, and their artillery will not be able to help them now, because if you want to take those huge towns, you need a lot of military personnel, because you can bomb the towns, but you then need to send guys in, and Russia at the moment does not have the capability. If somehow Putin would be able to pull off general mobilization, then we can speak
Okay, so that's the
this
key. You
possibility to
think
happen.
that they
Otherwise,
have
not.
about 140 million people in their country, roughly. Maybe it's 130. I don't know. Yeah. So let's just say 140 million.
So if he pulls the mobilization, if he pulls the general mobilization and remains on the position on his seat, so he's not deposed, then it's possible. But this is it would be really hard, because if he hasn't done the general mobilization since the beginning, what's different now? It's even more hard to pull it off, because now the three clans are against him.
Why do you think that Putin decided to do this? I mean, he seemed to be so shrewd before. And now I was just imagining, okay, let's just think the best case scenario. The best case scenario for Putin is that he conquers the entire country of Ukraine. But let's just think more realistically that he just solidifies the east, and he basically grabs the east. He grabs it all the way out to Mariupol. And so he has cut them off almost. Maybe he'll leave Odessa so he doesn't completely cut them off. Basically, what he has now, he kind of consolidates and grabs. And then, but then he's going to have to spend billions and billions of dollars to reconstruct this whole territory that he completely destroyed with all his bombs. It's just like, what a headache.
Yeah.
What a headache. And this is like the best case scenario. So why did he even do this?
So he's improvising all along. I mean, he bumps into something and then he changes his strategy, his goals.
But he's not the kind of guy who does this kind of stuff. I mean, all his life for 20 plus years in power at the top of Russia, and then before that, when he was in the KGB and other lower positions, the guy was a very shrewd, calculating guy. He never fucked up, ever.
Yeah, but he is getting older. He was probably getting paranoid with all this COVID stuff and him getting isolated. Also, there was a huge, a huge distance between what reports he was getting and the real situation on the ground, because all the FSB guys who were doing the reports, of how Russia can take over Ukraine, were not really thinking that this is going actually to happen. So they were writing reports, this is quite clear now, that were basically, okay, if I make this report, which shows the real situation on the ground, basically we cannot attack Ukraine, the guy above him in the FSB hierarchy would say, no, this is not good, fix it. And so the lower echelons were fixing the reports until it were very rosy, until those reports were very rosy, and then they would pass on to Putin eventually. And so what Putin got was a totally unreal estimates of how the war will go. he wanted to repeat the 2014 events, where special operations forces would go in, Ukraine will be totally disorientated, and many people would back him up. The locals would back him up, and then the government will be decapitated. Maybe Zelensky will escape out of Kiev for the fear of his life, but then everything turned out to be different the way they planned. And from that point on, they were just, trying to not really strategize about things, but just, trying to fix. From day to day, they were trying to fix things. Why it took them 1 month in front of Kiev when it was quite apparent, only in few days already, that it was not possible to take Kiev? But they're very stubborn. They were trying to show something, to try this attack, try that attack, but nothing worked. Well, it was quite apparent that this doesn't work, so it took them 1 month and huge amounts of casualties until they withdrew from the north. And then they tried in the eastern part, again the same thing. And they again, people think, especially because the Western media reports, oh yes, the whole Lugansk has been conquered, but these are just a very small increments of area that were taken. Really, strategically not important amount of land was taken in the recent eastern offensive, which lasted for 2 months and caused huge casualties on the Russian side. So of course, okay, they can say now the whole of Lugansk region is now Russian. They will try to take the whole of Donetsk region in their under them, but they will not be. I predict that they will not be able to do this. They will stop where they are now, and again, they will probably collapse. So there are different predictions. Some say, okay, at the end of the summer, the eastern part area where Russians are cannot hold on. The increasing amount of modern weapons which are delivered to Ukraine, which are able to snipe very important parts of Russian front, of their logistical systems, and when you take away the ability from Russia to be able to bomb the crap out of you, because you destroy their ammo depots, then Russia is in big trouble, because they cannot really fight with their guys. They just have those artillery, huge amounts of artillery systems, and when you take that away from them, they will have to retreat.
Wow. So give me your rough timeline that you think it's going to be over, that they're going to start retreating by the winter.
Okay, so a very daring prediction would be that by the end of summer, the Russian front will start to crack quite a lot, and then until the winter, they will be pushed away from in Kherson region, in southern region where Zaporozhye, and in the area where Severodonetsk is, things will also be very, very hard for Russians. Very, very hard.
Okay.
So this is my prediction.
80%?
Yeah, let's say 80%. Okay. Yeah. And also, if I would be quite surprised if Putin remains in power for half more year.
Half of more? You think he's going to leave by 2023?
Even doesn't have to be assassinated. He can be just, okay, he's because the way this guy who is making the shots now, public shots, is acting is like, okay, leave this old guy. He needs some rest, So the FSBs can do this a bit more elegantly, They can
give him a nice
put
dasha.
him in the background, Putin more. Yeah.
Right. Okay, so you think that Putin will kind of lose a lot of authority by the beginning of 2023?
Yep.
I know none of these predictions are 100% certain. You're not 100% confident of these things happening. So just give a number, like a percentage that you think, how confident you are that Putin will lose a lot of his power by sometime in early 2023. Are you talking about 60% chance?
I'm 60 to 70% chance of that happening, and I would say that there are some chances also of Russia starting to go into internal squabbling, and all these clans which are already bickering a lot at the moment. might go into an open open hostilities. So Russia might enter civil war in the
On
next
the
year.
100th anniversary of their civil war, practically. it's, it's back
Yeah.
that the one that brought Lenin to power.
And imagine what happens. Imagine what happens then. So for the West, you have to really make a very good case to Russia that what it is doing is not sustainable and not okay, because if Russia succeeds in maintaining the ground that it managed to take now, then Russia in a few years will repeat the same process after they get replenished and so on. So they will try to take some more land. This has always been the way Russia acts. And if you manage to put Russia into a civil war, then you have a huge problem with nuclear arsenal, because then you have these warlords, taking care of the nuclear arsenal, raiding the depots, taking stuff for themselves, and then it's a global problem, really, because there's no more organized system around nuclear arsenal. Is just chaos, and to each his own, and that would be really problematic. So we are really now treading on a very thin line between having to make Russia breathe really hard in Ukraine and preventing the Russia to really collapse and start the civil war.
Okay, so last thing is, what is the percentage chance that you think that the eastern province of Ukraine gets effectively annexed to Russia? So that is the stalemate, the peace treaty goes that way, and so they keep Crimea, and they get Crimea in the east.
Frozen conflict. Yeah. So what are the chances that the frozen conflict will happen like the last time from 2014, when things just didn't move anyway? There's
I wouldn't call that a
20%
I wouldn't say it's a frozen conflict, because they literally just won Crimea. I mean, I don't think it was like a stalemate. I mean, they just got it.
Oh no. There was a frozen conflict between Ukraine and Russia since 2014. They were always fighting each other. Guys were.
I see what you mean. You're talking about, but that was mainly in the east, not so much in Crimea.
Crimea was cemented.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Crimea
was cemented. So Crimea could get into Ukraine hands, but only if Russia enters civil war. When there is such huge chaos that there's no central authority, to each his own, then Ukraine can go to Crimea and take it back. But I think chances for that are small.
Yeah, they'll probably ask for independence, and they want to be yet another republic in a country by themselves. Do something stupid like that.
Yeah.
Anyway, interesting.
While in the east, the Donetsk and Luhansk regions, I'm quite sure that Ukraine will be able to retake those areas. And then it will fall on Ukrainian shoulders to rebuild everything that was destroyed. Because, Russians don't really distinguish between, areas. They just bomb the hell out of everything and destroy the towns completely. 90% of infrastructure is destroyed.
Right.
And, it will be also on the Western shoulders to put on like a Marshall Plan to rebuild stuff. Right. So huge opportunities for construction workers from the West to go there after the war.
That's why we planned the whole thing. It wasn't Putin. It was the CIA. You gotta always blame everything on the United States. Great, Nate. Thanks so much for the update. I really appreciate it. And we've got the summary: 80% chance that you think a pretty bad defeat for Russia, including a 65% chance that Putin will get out, and about a 20% chance that the best case scenario, well, not the best case, but one of the better cases for Russia, which is 20% chance that they will actually solidify and cement control of the eastern region.
And the conflict is then frozen until 10 years after, when it still gets unfrozen and Russia tries to gain some more land.
Or Ukraine decides to have the balls to try to recapture their lost land.
Yeah. Right. Yeah, exactly. Right. Yeah. It could go either way. Yeah.
Nate, thank you again. And we'll have you back in a couple of months to see how your predictions fared.
Yep.